We are farmers.
Hi, my name is Bill Michalak. I was a former designer at GM. Worked there for 35 years and I was a senior designer and had a lot of nice years there. It was a very enjoyable job and it's something that I wanted to do from when I was 8 years old. My father was a fireman in New York City. I'm from Staten Island, New York. And he used to take me in the mid-50s to the Motoramas in the Waldorf Astoria. And that's where I would have been like 10 years old, and that's where I said, that's what I want to do. I want to design cars for GM. When I was little, I had a lot of cars. There weren't that many things you could buy back then, you know, and we didn't have any money, so I couldn't buy a lot of things. But I bought a lot of kits, and I used to build the kits, but I never built the kits. 99% of the time, I didn't build a kit in production. You know, I would customize it or do something to it, you know, or not just, you know, even buy a hot rod. I wouldn't build the way the hot rod would be. I'd change it, you know. So that was where I guess the design and creativity part started back then, you know, back in the 50s, early 50s, you know, doing that kind of stuff. Book-wise, I just love books. And I love the history of books. I love the history of the cars and stuff like that. And I collect a lot of the books on the designers and stuff like that that they put out over the years. And every book was different. You'd pick them up and you'd see different things in the book and just reading the histories. And I just love books. Well, my favorite car, and I have a picture of it because they haven't made a model of it yet, is the Chevrolet Biscayne. There's a four-door sedan that they came out with, I think in '55 it may have been. And that's the one I think that's why I like Chevys too. But that car was just all the unique features on it and stuff like that. And it was just, that probably was the thing that really set me off and saying, you know, that's what I want to do, really want to do. When I got into high school, it turned out that my grade advisor was also my art teacher, which was really nice. So in high school, people usually take art for the first year, and that's it. Like, you know, we got to do real stuff. But I wound up taking art all 4 years, major art for the next 3 years, because he was my art teacher. And so as years went by, I wanted to figure out where should I go to school, you know, because obviously the place was Art Center, but I knew I wasn't going to be able to do that. We couldn't afford that. So then we learned that it really was industrial design is what you really should know, you know, if you can't go to Art Center. So we knew Pratt was there, and he helped me get into the summer program in between the junior and senior year of high school at Pratt. And they picked like 10 people in all of New York City, and I got into that. So that was a very good thing, and it was all mainly to my teacher, you know, that helped me, directed me there. It was really good. Their main emphasis was form. So anything you did was a three-dimensional thing, structures and stuff like that. You know, we had regular classes like any school, you know, art history and all that kind of stuff like that, but it was all the drawing, and you did draw, you had to learn perspective and all that stuff, but no cars. The transportation class was only the last year. And in the last year or so, a friend of mine that was at Pratt too, he got to go to the summer program at GM, you know, in between our junior and senior year. And so when he came back, he helped myself and about 3 other guys. We would get together and he would kind of show us, and we learned a lot from him. And that was really nice, because he was kind of showing us what GM was expecting, you know. And he was kind of the best student in the class too. So he was really, really good. I did eventually get a job offer from Ford, but I said I don't want to work for Ford. I want to work for GM. So I wrote them a little letter, you know, little thing. I still have a copy of it, requesting an interview, because I never really had an interview with them. So they were coming back with a final project at the end of the year, and they sent a note back that they would interview me when I got there, when they got there. And they went and came to the project, and they came into the room, and it was a rectangular room, and they went all around the room, and mine was the last one that they looked at. And at the other end of the room, there was this guy that had helped us out, that had worked at GM, and they obviously his was the best car. It was really nice. And then they came around to mine. And we had no names on. There were no names on the drawing on the cars or anything, so they didn't know who did them. And they wound up liking my car the best, in second place. And then Chuck Jordan, he said, well, we're supposed to interview this Bill Michalak, whatever he said, I don't remember. And I said, well, that's me, And so, well, that's good. So we went in the other room, and I had my portfolio, and they went through it with Bill Porter was there too, and then HR people and stuff like that. And after about 20 minutes, Jordan going through, he said, well, as far as I'm concerned, you're hired. They had what they call the school or design development. And you went in there, and it was in the front of the building. And at the time, I think there were like 12 or 14 people in there. And about half the people were from Art Center, and then other people were from other schools. And so I just started drawing and learning from the other people, and seeing what they're doing, seeing how to do things, but still trying to do my own forms from Pratt, do my own designs. And you just, over the weeks, you just keep on developing, and because you just sit there all day long drawing, and you start learning. You could go in there for a month, you could go in there for 6 months and stuff like that, whatever. Whenever they decided that you were what they wanted, you were able to go into a production studio. But in my case, like I say, I went there in June, and then all of us were up for being drafted. So then in January, I was drafted. Brought everything home to New York City and came back. And when I came back, they had closed down the school, and everybody was gone. And I said, well, what happened? They said, well, we moved about 5 people into the studios, and all the rest were gone. When I came back, and they had to open up design development again just for me. So they have a senior designer, a boss, an engineer, and a modeler, and me. And we were in there for about 2 months just doing all kinds of wild projects. And Jordan finally came in one day and said, we want to close this place down, because we want to move you into a studio. So I had to find out if I was going to be taken or not. And I called, and they said, no, you're a 1Y, you're not going to be taken. So I told them that. Within a day or two, they closed it down, and I went to Oldsmobile studio. Back then, when you went into a studio, you went in and you were working on 3 years of cars. So like in my case, went into studio in 1967, so I was probably working on, like I say, maybe grill changes for 68, 69, and then you'd be working on some changing the whole front end or rear end of the car, which was a major facelift change for 70, and then, 69, and then a major all-new vehicle for 70, So you'd be working on 3 different years all at the same time. So you really wouldn't know what year you were living in, which was kind of interesting. Well, the engineers never could build what you drew. So that we had the trouble with that all the time. Oh, no, we can't build that. But then you'd show them a piece of like a fender that was made 5 years ago, and they said, well, you made that. Why can't you make this, So you'd have to fight for your designs and stuff like that, because they would just want to do pretty much what they knew. They would have to be shown, no, you can do this. I think the first major thing that I worked on that actually got on, the road was the 70 Cutlass 442. The whole design was the side, and I did a lot on the front also. I know now, though, I see a car now, and I saw, like we just saw a 70 Olds 98, and I said, I remember doing a full-size rendering of that car, because I worked on that. And I'll say, well, I did that, and I did that, and they'll be at a show or something like that, and I'll say, oh, I did that wheel, or I did this, and Denise will say, don't say that. I said, why? I said, well, they'll know how old you are. And I said, I don't care how old I am. I worked on that. I did that. That's my history. I know because I worked in production studio almost my whole career, except for about 3 years. I was in an advanced area, but even in advanced area, we worked on production things. So I got a lot of things on the cars over the years. which was really nice. I was too quiet back then. I didn't really fight that much. I try to let my drawings speak for me. Well, I think when I finally started to learn how to render and stuff like that, I think I tended to be very sedate and calm in my drawings. I didn't do these wild, flashy drawings and stuff like that. I mean, even like this, there's a lot of stuff going on there, but the rendering is pretty subtle. You know, there's not a lot of flash and highlights and stuff flowing all over the place, going all over the place, you know. So I think most of us guys from Pratt tried to do something that, here's what it's going to look like. You could see it in the drawing. And I know that a lot of the modelers liked that because they could look at a drawing and they could just go and start modeling because they knew what the form was. When I started back then, probably half the modelers were woodworkers. You know, they came from other parts where they learned how to cut the templates and things like that. They really weren't modelers. Later, right around that time frame, they started hiring all modelers that had degrees in art, fine art, and sculpture and stuff. But they were the good ones to work with because they knew form, and like I say, just look at the drawing and they could model it. I went into Pontiac maybe in like 70. Well, you just look at the history of the car, you know, over the last previous 5 or 10 years, and they will have a look, you know, of certain kind of grills. You know, like a Pontiac grill is the more like this actually. You know, a lot of people that look at that think it was a Pontiac, but grills like that didn't come out until in the 70s with the Firebirds and things like that, but that was done way before that. But all the little cues, the design cues, and you just have to learn them. And like I say, then I went to Chevy, and you know, then you knew what a Monte Carlo was, you know, the history of Monte Carlo, what you do there. And so it was all the, just the feel of the whole car, you know, the little detail here, detail there, what the design look, the design cues of that brand. I worked in the production studio up until like probably late 80s. And then I went into an advanced area for a little while, and then I went back in the production studios. Well, in a production studio, you have to work on production stuff, you know, then you work with the suppliers and work with every engineers and all this stuff like that to make the thing so it is productionable and can go and be produced. But in an advanced studio, you may be working on down the road, 5-10 years down the road a lot of times. But sometimes they'll take a design and they'll work on it and say, like what happened with the Riviera, the Boaterra Riviera, you know, that was done in an advanced area. And then when they said, this is what we want to do, they'd send it to the production studio and productionize it. Mm-hmm. So it worked like that way sometimes too. But you're always working farther down the road in an advanced area. You didn't have to follow all the rules, you know, bumper rules and all this other kind of stuff like that. The first couple of years it was kind of difficult because the engineers were directing a lot of things as safety reasons, like say how the bumper had to be or where the A-pillar had to be or something like that. Then after a couple of years when they started having the plastic bumpers or whatever, where they're covering all the frame, the bumper that was behind there, you know, all this flubber stuff, you got to start working with all that thing and you got to make them look nice again. You know, but the first couple of years where these big bumpers and stuff like that was a challenge to make them look pretty nice. At that time, all the science fiction stuff was on TV and space program and all this kind of stuff like that. A lot of stuff was breaking loose. So you think about things, you'd have a project where come up with a different way a door would work or something like that. You know, so you come up with all these different concepts. And, you know, where the door is going to open up like this or it's going to open up like this, you know, and you come up with all this kind of stuff. Try to do new things, come up with new things. That's your job. Well, I'm working with the League of Retired Designers, and where every year we try to do a car and what we think the car would look like either now or 5 years from now or 10 years from now. And so it keeps you thinking. Somebody started saying about voting for the design and stuff like that. And we said, no way, it's not going to be a competition. It's just going to be fun.